Growing up, we lived in a small 2-up, 2-down council house in a rural town. The house dated back to maybe the 30s or 40s, and we knew that the last occupant had been an older lady with a black Labrador. I think the neighbours told my parents about her, and our door number had a black lab on it also. I wouldn't say that the house was really badly haunted, but a few strange things happened to us over the years. My family was mum, dad, myself and my younger sister. Mum and dad were also into spirituality and mediumship at the time, although they kept that part of their lives as separate as possible from us as young children. Whether or not that affected activity in the house, I don't know. My mum had a few strange experiences that I only heard about later on, as she wouldn't want to frighten us while we lived there. I remember playing in the front room, and when I heard my mum scream out as she was going up the stairs. We all ran to get to her, as we thought she'd fallen. Mum was fine, just shaken, but she wouldn't tell us what had made her scream. I had a young kid's attention span, so I went back to my dolls or toys and largely forgot about it. Later on, my mum told me that she had been carrying washing up the stairs and had nearly tripped over a large black dog that just appeared and then disappeared on the middle step. This happened twice, I think during a span of maybe 10 years. She also saw our lovely ginger cat on the stairs, who'd been hit by a car and passed away a few months back. My parents told me that when I was maybe 6 or so, I used to tell them about an old man or lady who used to visit me at night and stand over my bed. I have no recollection of this, which is strange, but maybe I just blanked it out. By far the strangest thing that happened to myself and my younger sister. I was 8 and she was 7. My parents didn't know anything about this. As being kids, we didn't really say anything about it too much. Looking back now, I can see how strange and creepy it was. Me and my sister shared a bedroom with a bunk bed. We would periodically swap bunks over depending on what mood we were in. The wall height was relatively small, so the top bunk was pretty close to the ceiling. Whilst I was in the top bunk, I would often hear heavy footsteps echoing across the attic floor. They would start at one end of the room and stomp, stomp, stomp across to the other. If I put my hands out, I could feel the vibrations through the wall. I think the first time it happened, I called for my dad, and of course, by the time he came up, it had stopped. This happens a fair few times over the years, and my sister heard it too. Eventually, we just ignored it. The only way up into the attic was through a small hatch in the bathroom ceiling. The bathroom was next to our room, on the small landing. I know my parents were both downstairs, so not sure what it could have been. Anyway, one morning my sister and I were playing in our room. Our dad had gone to sleep in the bedroom next door and he was tired. He suffered from insomnia, and Mum was out working that day. We both heard a strange click come from the bathroom, and then a strange gargling sound voice started talking to myself and my sister. For the life of me, I can't really remember what it said, only that it made us laugh a bit. It was fairly loud, and it sounded like my dad's deep voice, but as if it had been out through some weird echoing, gargling filter. We were convinced it was our dad, as he used to put in strange voices to make us laugh. Something definitely felt off though, and I do remember that it asked us to go to the bathroom. We just looked at each other at that point and didn't move. The voice carried on for a bit, and at one point, I think we both laughed quite loudly. It was then my dad woke up, quite cross, and demanded to know why we were both being so loud. We told him that he had been making us laugh, resulting in some confusion, as we thought the voice had been him all along. He went back to sleep, uttering dire warnings about us waking him up again. Then it was quiet for a bit, and eventually you heard Dad snoring. At this point, we were both feeling quite scared, and being kids, we hid under the duvet and stayed silent. There was a loud click from the bathroom again, and then the weird gurgling sounding voice started up once more. We did scream out for Dad and woke him up again, and he was not happy at all, thinking that we had both been silly. We all went downstairs and kind of forgot about it for a while. My sister swears blind that she can't remember this. However, a few years ago, we found a box of old stuff, including her old diary. We were going through it for a laugh when we came across an entry that spoke of how frightened she had been when a weird goblin voice spoke to us through the attic. She'd even drawn a little picture of us hiding under the duvet. Still no clue as to what it could have been to this day. I had a really hard time sleeping last night. My partner had an early morning, and our 3-year-old passed out. I finally fell asleep around 4 a.m. I'm jolted awake by my 3-year-old yelling about something. He wanted the hallway light back on. No one else can sleep like this. I'll shut my door until he falls asleep, then turn the light off and open my door. I looked at my partner, who was sleeping still, yelled out to my son, which surprisingly didn't wake my partner, and got up to turn the light on. I closed the bedroom door behind me so my partner wouldn't be blinded. I told my son to go back to sleep and walked around to the kitchen. It was 7:15 a.m, but there was no sunlight and it was quiet outside, way later than I expected. I walked through the Jack and Jill bathroom back to my bedroom to alert my partner he was late. When I got back to bed, it was empty. We must have crossed paths and he's in the shower. I go look, having a very unsettled feeling. Bathroom's empty. The house is empty except for my son and my dog, who's passed out throughout this event. I called my partner, feeling slightly nauseous and panicked. He stated he left the house at 6 a.m. No one woke up, not even the dog, which he noted was super strange. We laughed, and I attempted to go back to sleep until my son woke back up. I never was able to sleep, and haven't been able to shake this feeling that something isn't right. So my boyfriend is out of town for the week, and I've got the apartment to myself. I spent yesterday cleaning and playing a retro video game, and then went to bed around 3 a.m. We've known for a while that our apartment is haunted, and as I've said before, it's just a block away from a graveyard. Anyway, I always sleep facing the wall that our bed is up against, with just a pillow between me and it. My dog sleeps on his bed, which is at the foot of our bed, and the cat has a bed under a table, which we have our air conditioner on, because its hose doesn't reach the window without it. And yes, I know single hose units are terrible. I woke up around 5:30 a.m. and saw a hand in front of me on the bed. It looked like a normal hand or arm coming out from under the blankets, but there wasn't really room in front of me for someone to be laying there. I grabbed the hand, I don't know why, and I felt it jump like it startled whoever it was attached to. Then I heard a voice come from under the bed saying, "Huh?" My dog and cat bolted out of their beds and ran out of the room. Then the hand just vanished, and I was laying there holding nothing. I had a feeling that I shouldn't reply, though whatever, and went back to sleep. I don't know why I felt impelled to grab the hand, and I don't know why it didn't scare me. Maybe my previous experiences with disembodied voices and shadow people? I know I wasn't dreaming because I could read the clock, and when I'm dreaming, I have a sort of hazy pressure feeling, and I know it wasn't sleep paralysis because my pets reacted to it. Maybe one of our ghosts? Big things never happen when my boyfriend is home. The occasional light will turn on or off, and the cupboards sometimes open and close themselves. We've seen a shadow peek into our room, but we've never felt like we were in danger from the usual stuff. Immediately after the car accident that started all of this, I was in the hospital getting patched up. On the third day, the doctors were starting to reduce the quantity of painkillers and sedatives they were pumping into my system, and I started to experience longer periods of lucidity. At shift change, a new nurse came in to care for me. He introduced himself, cracked a joke, and I felt connected to him immediately. He was obviously great at his job and skilled at calming people down, while they went through the most traumatic experience of their lives. He told me he'd be back to check on me soon, showed me how to use the call button and left the room. Almost immediately, I started feeling an immense amount of pressure on my head, which I can only describe as the feeling in your ears during aggressive altitude changes. I hope I'm describing this in a useful way. It's super hard to describe. I felt like someone was yelling at me. Imagine what it feels like to be screamed at, but the room was silent, except for the mechanical noises of the machines I was connected to. This feeling grew and grew steadily for about an hour, until I felt like I couldn't take it anymore. Without knowing what else to do, I opened my mouth and verbally said, "Please back away, you're crowding me." To my surprise, the sensation lightened some. I said thank you out loud and felt even more relief. At this point, I started to get the impression that I was feeling a female presence. Again, I cannot explain why I knew this. I did my best to relax into the feeling, and I started to feel like I was getting more information. I felt confident I was speaking to a woman named Anne or Anna, who had died in an adjacent room a few days ago. I felt that she wanted me to thank the male nurse for preserving her dignity as she passed. About this time, the nurse walked back into the room and started checking my vitals. My heart was racing, and he noticed. He asked if I was feeling okay, and I told him that I was. I couldn't bring myself to bring this up to him. I felt like I was losing my mind. He left again, and the feeling of pressure intensified continuously until he returned an hour later. By this point, I felt like I would burst if I didn't comply with this request. So I'd said something to the effect of, "Listen, I know this sounds insane, and I'm mostly telling you this so that you can identify if I'm having a mental break or not. Ever since you walked into this room, an older woman has been asking me to thank you for helping her pass with dignity." I will absolutely never forget the look on his face as long as I live. A handful of emotions flashed across his face. Shock, fear, suspicion, and then, to my surprise, empathy. He said, "I know exactly what you're talking about. Is she here now?" I told him that she was, and he said, "You're welcome, ma'am. I hope you're feeling better." My head exploded. I had never told him that I thought her name was Anne or Anna. As soon as he left the room again, I immediately felt better. I never ran into Anne again during my stay in the hospital, but Mike, the nurse, worked my room as often as he could during the next 3 months while I was there. This was my first experience I had after my NDE, and since then, I have literally thousands of experiences. As I said, as I get a moment or two here and there, I'll add some more stories for you guys. I know how crazy this stuff sounds, and half the time, I think I'm nuts. During the aftermath of the accident that nearly killed me, I was given nearly unlimited access to opioid painkillers. This was years before the opioid epidemic that has ravaged this country came to light, and doctors were giving out Percocet freely. As a direct result, I was addicted to these drugs and spent a number of years dulling my senses. I've come to believe that the drugs were interfering with these abilities, and I can't recall any meaningful experiences through this period. In retrospect, I can't help but wonder if dulling these experiences made the drugs feel that much better. Fast forward about 5 years, I've gotten clean. I met a girl who would become my wife and the mother of my child. We had been dating for a few months, and I had been fighting the urge to share this with her. I was falling in love, and I was afraid that she'd think I was crazy and withdraw. For weeks, I'd been getting very insistent messages that her late mother wanted me to pass along. She hadn't fully processed her mother's passing, understandably, and she'd been coping with destructive behaviour up to the point we met. After weeks of constant pressure when we were together, my ability to fight was waning, and I finally decided that I had to take the risk and tell her about my abilities, even if that meant her pushing me away. I knew that I had to tell her, but I wanted to be sure that I approached the conversation in a way that would give me the best chance of convincing her without pushing her away. I decided that asking her mother to share something with me that I could use to validate the fact that I was telling the truth would give me the best chance. It would have to be something that I could never know, that no one else could know. Being in proximity to the living person sharpens the messages and provides better clarity. So I decided that the next time we were together, I would speak with her mother and ask her to give me something indisputably. A few hours later, I was sitting in her bedroom with her and worked up the courage to get it over with. I went through an exercise I used to open. I can share if anyone's interested. Usually, thinking of a deceased person brings them to me, and this day was no different. I asked her mom to share something unique with me and held myself open to receive whatever she decided to share. 2 things happened immediately. Firstly, I was overwhelmed by a floral scent, which her mother told me was a blackberry-scented lotion she loved and wore every day. Secondly, I immediately began rubbing the pad of my pointer finger and my thumb compulsively. Her mother didn't explain this, but assured me that it would mean something to her. Now comes the tricky part. How do I start this conversation? If you have a gift like mine or think you might, you may have found yourself asking a similar question. It's a constant struggle. I fought with it for about an hour and finally decided to go for broke. I can't remember now exactly what I said. This happened in 2010, but I said something like this. So listen, the next few minutes are going to be strange. I need you to hear me out, and then, if you want me to leave, I will. She was obviously concerned, but agreed to hear me out, so I continued. You know about the accident I was in when I was a teenager? You've seen the scars. But there's one other lasting symptom. Since that day, I've gotten messages from the other side every day. Every time we are together, I have someone trying to get through to you, and I can't fight it anymore. I'm afraid this will scare you away, but I have to share this with you if we're going to be together. To her credit, she assured me that she could handle it and knew me well enough to know that I wasn't crazy or a liar. I decided not to come right out and say that I was speaking with her mother, because I wanted her to make that connection on her own. She told me to go ahead, and I started with the scent. I told her that I was overwhelmed by the scent of blackberries, and she was immediately crying. She went to her bathroom and rummaged around under the sink for a while. She came back with a bottle of the lotion that her mother had when she died. She wasn't able to bring herself to throw it away. She opened the bottle and we both sniffed it. I confirmed that this was the smell I was getting. Then I showed her the finger and thumb thing. She laughed out loud and smiled huge. Her mother had used this gesture to poke fun at her grandmother, who was always fondling a rosary using the same motion. She got a good laugh out of this, and I could not have asked for a better validation. Her mom really nailed it. I took this to mean that her mother approved of our relationship. Those on the other side can see all our deepest secrets and have full transparency into our lives. The fact that her mother helped me convince her that I was telling the truth meant a lot to me, as she could have easily sabotaged me if she didn't want us together. I spent the rest of the night facilitating a conversation between my girlfriend and her deceased mother, which was long overdue, and helped her grieve in a way that she hadn't been able to before. We got married in 2013 and welcomed our daughter in 2016. We've been happily married for nearly 10 years, and her mother is a constant presence in our house. How do spirits communicate with me? People often ask me if I see dead people, and thankfully, the answer is mostly no. Every once in a while, I'll see a person on the street that looks different to me. Really hard to explain. And after asking my wife, she'll tell me that she didn't see anyone matching my description. This most often happens to me in the car for some reason. No clue why. People also ask me if I hear audible voices, and again, thankfully, the answer is mostly no, with some exception. In general, spirits don't speak to me at all. Most commonly, spirits insert imagery into my head, and that they mean to be representative of the concept they want me to share with their living friend or relative. As an example, if his deceased father was a mechanic in life, he may show me a wrench or a car, or something else that he thinks will make sense to his child. If a person was a drug addict in life that played a role in their death, they might show me a syringe or some other paraphernalia. I also have some empathetic ability, so a spirit might impress upon me the feeling of love, guilt, or anything else they want their loved one to understand. My particular gifts are not great with names or numbers. It's very rare that I'll completely and correctly get a name. Much more commonly, I'll get a first initial or a nickname, or something else that validates for the person I'm reading that I'm communicating with a specific person. Numbers are also tricky. As an example, if someone asks me how old a loved one was when they passed, the best I can generally do is a range. This person was a teenager, etc. People often ask me for guidance on the future, and my personal experience has been that the other side has very little to offer as it relates to the future. I believe that the future is too variable, based on individual choice, for any accurate, consistent prediction. That being said, I've heard other mediums claim the ability to predict the future to one extent or another, and I think that's totally possible. That isn't, however, my personal experience. I sure do wish my guides would share the Powerball numbers with me though. My gifts are super visual in my mind, So as a result, I have had an abnormally high level of success describing people and places that I've never seen or been to. One complication, though, is that spirits must describe themselves, and often describe themselves as they were when they were younger and more self-confident. In rare instances, a spirit will show me what they look like near death if doing so will help to validate their loved one, but that's rare. More commonly, a person who died in their 50s might show me an image of them in their 30s. This can, at times, make it harder to validate. If I'm describing a fit man with black hair in his 30s, but a person's husband passed away with grey hair in his 60s, that can be understandably confusing. It's important to keep in mind that each person's gift is unique, and each medium is giving different gifts. My gifts require a high level of interpretation at times, which complicates things for me. The opening of many doors. This exercise is one that I've developed in the 17 years that I've been dealing with this. Firstly, a quiet, comfortable place helps immensely. You can do this anytime, any place, but doing it in a quiet, dark room will help. I'll close my eyes and picture a door in my mind. I spend a substantial amount of time visualizing an extremely intricate door. I think about the details, the hardware, the embellishments, everything. I imagine this door standing in a black void, with no consideration to where this door may be. Once I have a very clear and detailed image of the door in my mind, I imagine myself stepping forward, opening the door, passing the threshold, and pulling the door closed behind me. Once on the other side of this first door, I imagine a second, completely different door. I repeat all the steps above numerous times until I've passed through many different doors. I believe that each of these doors represents increasingly deep levels of consciousness. The number of doors and amount of time spent on the exercise varies depending on my level of focus, environment, and mental state. But I normally spend between 10 and 30 minutes doing this before I attempt to read someone. I know that I'm down when spirit messages begin coming through loud and clear. It's important to note that this exercise can also work in reverse. If I'm feeling particularly overwhelmed, I'll use this exercise to quiet things down. The only difference when I'm trying to close is I'll imagine the doors starting with the doors open, and I'll step through and close them behind me. I don't normally do this after every reading, but after a particularly emotional reading or after a very loud day, I may use this to wind down and protect myself. After I shared my gift with my wife, she was understandably excited to have a psychic medium for a boyfriend, and proceeded to embarrass me repetitively by using my gifts to spook her friends and family. This ended up being a blessing in disguise, as though it was nerve-wracking to continually explain my gifts and risk ridicule. It also gave me a chance to develop my gifts in a way that I never had before. I'd spent the majority of my energy trying to ensure that no one ever found out, but now I was beginning to explore the possibilities. One of the first people my then girlfriend outed me to was her cousin, who'd been more like a sister to her their whole lives. I'll refer to her as Becky throughout this story to keep things clear. This reading was different from the one I did for my wife. Most notably, I was aware that my wife's mother had passed. I knew her name, etc. This would be completely different, as I wouldn't know in advance if Becky hoped to contact a man or a woman, or what her relationship to that person would be. The additional variables add to the internal conflict and make it even harder to decide which direction to go. One of the biggest problems that my gifts present for me is that it can be really hard for me to tell what is a message from spirit and what is my own thought. For the first time during this reading, I decided to try a new tactic. I used a notepad to write down everything that came through my mind without second guessing it, and afterward, I let her review all of my notes and determine for herself what was important. This worked out extremely well, and a number of the things that I would have talked myself out of sharing were important to Becky. In fact, some of those things were the most important things of the reading. I settled down to connect with Becky's deceased loved one. Another question I get a lot is, why do certain people come through and others do not? Or why does one person come through before another? The truth is that I have no idea why that is. I have some thoughts, such as people with some level of intuitive gifts in life tend to be better communicators in death, and someone that is newly dead needs to learn to communicate, like a baby learning to talk. Those reasons might be a factor, might not, who knows. Sometimes one person is just more pushy than another. In this case, I was immediately approached by an elderly redhead that wanted to make it clear to me that she was Becky's maternal grandmother. This woman was an expert communicator, and luckily she had a name that was easy to create a visual for. She gave me a rose, and as I wrote the word down on my notepad, Becky immediately gasped and covered her mouth. As I would soon find out, Becky's maternal grandmother had been called Rose. As Rose and I started to connect more deeply, it became clear that I was in for an adventure. This lady was a lot. Rose started bombarding my mind with a series of images so quickly that I had trouble keeping up and writing things down. She started by showing me an image of herself, and I started writing down descriptives like mid-40s, crazy red hair, short and sinewy, etc. Becky was reading as I was writing, and it was clear to me from her expression that some of what I was writing was spot on, but other things were off. I asked her to help me understand her expression, and she mentioned that Rose was in her 70s when she died. I explained that people show me what they want to present, and that often people made themselves look younger. This made her laugh because in life, Rose had never been honest about her age. Rose went on to show me dancing, specifically doing the twist, which it turns out she had done every week up to the week she died. Rose proceeded to share a handful of more mundane validations before taking things in a darker direction. She showed me the letter J, which it turns out was a reference to her husband, who was still alive at the time. She showed me bruises, which indicated to me that their relationship had been less than happy at times. Rose then showed me a dove, which is a common sign spirits use to indicate a desire for peace, or to let their loved ones know that they are at peace. When I wrote J and then dove and peace, Becky's face soured, and she explained that her grandfather's name was Joe, and they were estranged due to his treatment of her grandmother. She snared that the thought of making peace with him was unimaginable. A week later, Becky was riding a public transportation bus, and who would walk onto that bus but her grandfather Joe? She hadn't seen him in years, and the coincidence was unnerving to her. She couldn't force herself to speak to him, and he didn't notice her, but it was odd nonetheless. The reading ended with Rose playing a song in my head, You Are My Sunshine, which was a song she would sing to her children when they were young, and later her grandchildren. Becky referred to her own mother as Sunshine for this reason, and with that, Rose stepped back. Not only was that reading validating for Becky, it was really important to me too. As I've said before, I'm my own biggest critic and often battle with feelings of imposter syndrome. The fact that I was currently able to identify, describe and communicate with someone that I hadn't known, and had no way of knowing about beforehand, was instrumental in my increasing confidence. The strength of my abilities and my accuracy are both deeply connected to my confidence and willingness to suspend disbelief. And many of the readings I've done since then were even more intense. In the summer of 2012, my wife and I decided to go to the shore for the weekend. We would be staying with her brother and his girlfriend, now my sister-in-law, who I'll refer to as Jimmy and Anne, at Anne's shore house. The house belonged to Anne's grandparents, which will come into play later. In addition to me, my wife, Jimmy and Anne, we would also be joined by Becky, my wife's cousin, and another of my wife's cousins who I'll call Joe. Joe brought along his friend Matt, who I had met once before. Pretty much as soon as we arrived, my wife outed me to her brother. She told him about the experience we had shared with her late mother, his mother too, and about the reading I had done for Becky. Becky confirmed everything my wife said, but Jimmy was understandably hesitant to believe anything he was hearing. Anne was present during the conversation and immediately jumped in, asking, "Do you feel any spirits in this house?" I told her that nothing was jumping out at me, but that I'd be willing to try and do a reading for her later that evening, half hoping that she'd forget. Her eyes lit up, and I knew I wouldn't get that lucky. We all settled in and unpacked, at which point Joe and Matt arrived. We started drinking and proceeded to have a really great night. We drank a lot. We had a barbecue, we played drinking games, and then ended up all skinny dipping in the bay. At one point, Jimmy fired up a neighbour's jet ski, naked, and did a few laps around the bay. Needless to say, it was a ton of fun. We got back to the house, cleaned up, and settled in to drink some more and chill out. Not more than 10 minutes after we settled into the couches around the living room, Anne reminded me about my promise to try a reading for her. This was obviously news to Joe and Matt, who hadn't yet arrived when my wife and Becky were telling the stories earlier, so we had to go back through all that and bring them up to speed. I agreed and started my exercise to open up for reading. Almost immediately, I started receiving messages from spirits. I was approached by a man who appeared to be in his late 30s. He had grey hair beginning to grow in his temples, a sharp nose, and a receding hairline. I started to describe him, and Anne recognised him and didn't seem surprised in the least that he was the person that would step forward. This was her late Uncle Calvin. The house we sat in belonged to her grandparents, who had been Calvin's parents. Calvin had lived at the Shaw house in the months preceding his death. There were no pictures of Calvin in the house, as his parents were still heartbroken about his passing, and couldn't bear to look at them. Anne started rifling through a nearby drawer and produced a photo of 4 men in baseball jerseys. She asked which of the 4 was Calvin, and I was able to pick him out of the photo easily. This impressed everyone in the room, but I had a quarter chance, not that impressive, to me at least. I asked Anne for a notepad and started writing the messages I was receiving from Calvin. He started by showing me a very strange image. I took it to myself but wrote purple octopus as he was showing. Anne reacted visually, then said, "No fucking way. I dressed as a purple octopus one year for Halloween when I was 4 or 5. Clearly, I couldn't have known this. I pressed on with the reading, but noticed that Jimmy, Joe, and Matt were all paying closer attention now. I proceeded to write a number of things on the page, including pills, shower, shore, tools, and Southside. Calvin stopped there, and I took that to mean that he wanted me to show Anne before moving forward. After reading my notes, Anne went on to tell me that Calvin had battled addiction for years before his death. He had died under slightly mysterious circumstances and was found dead in a motel shower at another shore point a few hours from where we were. She also told me that he had lived on the south side of the largest local city and had been a tradesman in life. She asked if I could work with Calvin to provide some clarity around his death, so I asked Calvin to show me things that might help clear up the mystery. Calvin proceeded to show me a sequence of images, which I interpreted and started writing. I wrote drugs, friend, accident, fear, and shame. Then Calvin did something that no other spirit had done for me to that point. I saw in my mind's eye that he had been on a bender with a friend. He got too high and decided to take a shower to try and sober up a bit. He slipped in the shower, and on the way down, he smashed his left temple on the soap holder and went unconscious, doing significant damage to his skull and brain. A few minutes later, his friend found him dead in the shower and decided not to call for help, fearing that he would face legal issues due to the drugs they'd both been taking. I wrote fell, shower, left temple, brain damage. I also got the distinct impression that Calvin didn't want Anne to feel guilty in relation to his passing. I felt strongly that Calvin wanted me to tell her that there was nothing she could have done. I shared all of the above with Anne, who promptly devolved into an emotional sobbing state for about 10 minutes. When she composed herself, she confirmed that everything I had said to that point was absolutely correct. The most astounding thing to me personally was that I had correctly detailed his manner of death, down to the location of the injury. Her family had wondered whether Calvin's friend's decision had cost him his life, and it gave us some peace to know that it wouldn't have mattered. She also shared with me that the night Calvin died, he had texted her, but she hadn't answered. Coincidentally, Anne was in the same shore town at the time, and was the person who had identified Calvin's body. She had always felt tremendous guilt that she hadn't answered him, and had wondered if things would be different if she had. Calvin began to step away, and I thought we were done for the night. But oddly, another man stepped forward and started communicating with me. Everyone was pretty shook at this point, but you can't really turn this stuff off, so I tore off the page of notes from Calvin and started a new page. This man was quite large and showed himself wearing a US Postal Service uniform. I found this oddly specific and said to no one in particular. Calvin stepped back, but does anyone know a portly man that was a mail carrier in his life? Matt's head snapped around and he said, "That's my uncle." Matt's uncle, whose name was Chris, went on to validate a few other things, that he had driven a unique, large truck in life, the fact that he was married to Matt's maternal aunt, and that he had died of a heart attack. This particular part of the reading was extremely impactful for me personally, because I didn't know a thing about Matt. There was no possible way that I could have provided that level of detail that I had. This made me much more confident. We both went to bed, as normal, and the night felt really strange. I just had a feeling that I couldn't really describe. Anyways, I closed my eyes and went to sleep. Randomly during the night, I woke up and rolled on my side, and standing next to my bed was some little kid, grey skin, black eyes, etc. Note that I rarely ever wake up during the night. Anyways, this kid yelled out to me and said, "This is my house." The voice was quite deep. Then I yelled back and said, "No, this is my house," and then it disappeared. It was so weird. My girlfriend didn't hear me yell back either, which makes me feel like it was some ultra-realistic dream. I could confirm that it wasn't sleep paralysis, otherwise I wouldn't be able to roll on my side and lean up to communicate to this thing. Then I woke up the next morning, no sign of the entity or whatever it was. Maybe it left me alone because it knows that I'm taking good care of the house. I have no problem with it at all. It's been really quiet lately. If it understands who I am or understands that I keep the house in good condition, maybe it'll leave me alone. It's always welcome here, just as long as it doesn't harm us in a way. I'm 6'8", nothing will run through me. However, a spirit or something demonic will always have the power. I moved into that home around 9 years old, and moved out at 13. It was a very old house. Victorian age, but not as beautiful as the ones that come to mind. It was run down, but big and cheap, and my parents wanted to build onto it. An older married couple died in the kitchen at that house. They tried to keep warm by laying near the stove, but it didn't work. The house was also built on top of a cemetery. If anyone's curious, it was called the Boneyard in Houghton, Michigan. Anyways, the second I went to the upstairs of that house as a kid, I felt a presence I hated. It made me want to cry. I was 9. Ghosts were never a thought in my mind. I just knew I didn't like the feeling. I cried to my mom about how I wanted to sleep in the living room. It was my safe place. I didn't feel watched, and was scared. I ended up crying every time to the point where we had a mattress in the back of the living room for me to sleep. It went on until I was 11. When I used to go up there to grab anything, I would cover my ears and repeat what I'm doing, such as, "I'm grabbing my pants, I'll leave right after, I promise." And I felt like I was being stared at. I never actually heard voices, but I felt like my ears were heavy if I didn't plug them. More stuff happened in between, but once I turned 11, I slept upstairs for the very first time, because my parents thought it was ridiculous. At first it was hard, but then I ended up just trying to pretend it was me. Keeping in mind my best friend felt the same way. We both swear it till this day. And my parents admitted they felt the same once we moved out. Okay, skipping to the point. I had no door in my room. It was just a walkway. I knew something was there every night. Eventually, when we moved, I was 14 now. At this point, a year of my new home. I had a long dream of me watching my younger self sleep. The whole dream of me tossing and turning. Everything was detailed. I was standing at the doorway, and there was nothing else to the dream, just my younger self laying there. I knew it could just be my subconscious thinking about it, and it came into my dreams. But it sticks to me to this day. It made my experiences there feel more real, if that makes any sense. I know it sounds like I was young and it's whatever, but I'm 20 years old now. I remember the feeling, the stories, it's all vivid. It'll never leave my mind, and at that age, my parents never let me around ghost stories, scary movies, or anything of that sort. I haven't had much time for leisure with work recently. Been having to accept some pretty awful shifts to get by with COVID times. So I've lost my ability to go on my evening walks, which were a method of stress relief for me. It had been a while since I'd gone on one, so 3 nights ago, I decided to just go for a late night walk. I put on my headband flashlight and decided to take a path I hadn't in ages. There's a small trail near the back of my neighbourhood that goes about 4 miles deep into the woods. My plan was to walk about 1.5 miles in and take the parallel path to come back. I make it down to around 1.3 miles, according to my Fitbit, and I start getting that feeling I'm being watched. I turn off my headlight and sit still to listen. At this point, I'm more concerned there's a guy following me who's up to no good. I heard clear footsteps in the leaves off the trail, and they've been behind me for nearly 5 minutes. I stopped thinking it was an animal or another walker and became worried. Sitting there for probably 3 to 4 minutes and I hear nothing at all, I turn back on my headlight and decide to start walking quickly back home. About 2 minutes later, I hear footsteps again. This time it sounds different. Sounds like 4 feet instead of 2 feet walking, and it's walking at the same increased speed I am. I turn around quickly with my headlights and my phone light and point it behind me. Silence. I get angry and yell out, "Leave me alone! I'm going to call the cops. And if you come at me, I have a knife." Silence. I yell again to get the fuck out of here and start walking towards where I heard the walking. About 20 yards out, hard to fully make out because the flashlight doesn't reach too far, I see what looks like a literal naked man running full speed on all fours into the woods. Normally I'd chalk that up to drugs, but my area does not have a drug problem, and there were some details that led me to believe it wasn't a person. For one, they were damn near hairless, completely bald, pale white skin, and the way it ran on fours looked natural. Not like when you try to run on all fours and look stupid. It looked like its bone structure was designed to walk on all fours. There was no hunched look, their back was flat, and they were fast. Last thing that happened was straight out of a horror movie. I hadn't heard anything in a while on my way back, but kept turning around to be sure. With about 0.3 miles left to go until I was in the clear, I heard a mad dash through the leaves. I whip around and it stops on a dime. I see the edges of its head behind a tree and yell loudly to try and intimidate. What I heard next, I'll never forget in my entire life. It cackled like a monkey, a noise I've literally only heard in nature documentaries. The tone was that of a mockery, a predator having fun with me. I didn't stick around. I sprinted as fast as possible back home. I'd love to believe this was some prank, or some rabid, bald, diseased coyote, but I got a pretty clear look at it. It wasn't. It had human feet and human hands, a human head and a human buttocks, but nothing else about it was human. I called the cops after and told them that the man was following me. I didn't want to say some creature because they'd think I'm crazy. They didn't find anything, but they did see quite a bit of activity in the leaves and dirt, about 50 feet from where the trail was, leading far back into the woods before it got to a large stretch of grass, where no footprints were seen. We went back into the woods, saw it again. So after some internal debate, I decided I was going to go back because otherwise it would eat me up not knowing what this was. When I first saw it, I had zero idea what it could be. I figured some drugged out or mentally ill man, a prankster, or a sickly, deformed animal. After letting it all settle though, there's no way any of that was the case. I was trying to justify it in my mind because I've always been a heavy skeptic of anything paranormal. Still am, to be fair. But I'm warming up to the idea that crawlers may actually exist. So I messaged 3 of my buddies, told them everything that happened in detail over text, and asked if they'd come look with me. Them being non-believers like me, and also just loving adventure and spooky stuff, were more than excited to go. 2 of my friends have guns, and so do I, so we brought all them. The other friend was in charge of holding 2 flashlights to give us some light, one being a phone flashlight so we would be ready to take a picture at a moment's notice. We waited until about 9:30 PM, when it was completely dark out, and headed down the same trail I did last time. My heart was pumping out of my chest, but I felt more confident having friends. They were joking around and thought this was cool, and I tried joking back a few times, but the reality was I was pretty nervous. We walked the full 1.5 miles I had planned on walking last time and didn't encounter a thing. We'd prepped for so long though and didn't want to give up quite yet, so we kept walking. About 5 to 8 minutes later, at close to the 2-mile mark, we started hearing some noises way back in the woods. It wasn't close, but it was loud enough for us to take notice. I told my friend to turn off a flashlight for a second and we listened. Bipedal footsteps made their way closer to us. Still far, but definitely coming our way. Sounded like they were wearing boots or something because the heaviness of the steps was quite loud. That, or there were a lot of leaves, which to be fair is a possibility. It was off the trail, so it's all woods back there. Once the footsteps made it to about 20 to 30 yards away, I called out asking if someone was there. The footsteps stopped, but only for a brief second. A second later, the bipedal footsteps turned to what sounded like something sprinting in all 4s direction. My friend immediately turned on the flashlights, but there was nothing visible through the dense forest. At the beginning of the trail, the forest is pretty clear, but further back it gets a lot more dense, so it was hard to tell. Once he turned on the light, the footsteps stopped as well. None of my friends were talking. Paranormal believer or not, hearing that will scare the shit out of you. My friend unholstered his pistol and kept it by his side. He looked at me, and I could see he wasn't having a good time anymore. My friend holding the camera was visibly shaky, and was darting his glance between all of us. The third friend shortly after yelled into the woods that, "I see you! Come out, stop fucking with us! We have guns and we'll shoot. I don't want to hurt you over some dumb joke. Come on now!" We heard that sound again. I mentioned last time it sounded like a cackle. This time it was more of a yell, shriek, or aggravated noise. I don't even know what to compare it to. I just know it gave me goosebumps. My friend immediately shot his gun into the woods, causing my ears to ring horribly due to me being right next to him. I couldn't hear for shit, but I noticed his gaze went from the spot we heard the footsteps from over to the right of that spot, about 90 degrees. I followed his gaze and for about half a second caught a glimpse of once again a tall, human-like thing running on all 4s behind a tree. He started walking towards that direction, but my friend with the flashlight stopped him. He made the point that it was a buckshot. The chances he missed was slim due to the fact that the tree it was next to was covered in evidence that the shot was on target. My friend made a scary point that we hadn't considered. What if it hit, but didn't hurt it? What if he was right? What if it took a shotgun hit and didn't even fall over? My estimate is that it was between 6 foot and 6'4", and maybe between 140 and 165 pounds. So if it could still run after that shot, it either didn't get hit, or it's not something we want to mess with. We hear the cackle I heard the first time, that mocking noise. Not so much an aggravated noise this time, more so a noise that gave me the impression it was having fun, or enjoying the fear we blatantly had in our voices. No more footsteps, but my friend shot in its general direction again. Ears were ringing again. I couldn't hear anything, but I could see a small glimpse again of it running off deeper into the woods. Could only see its rear for a second or two before it was too far to be seen by the light. This meant it had to be running pretty fast. I don't want to give a number, but if I had to guess, it was easily around 20 miles an hour or so. Nothing a human could do on all 4s, that's for damn sure. We turned around and jogged back home. Upon getting home, we talked about what we saw. Nobody was disputing my story now. We had all seen it. We talked all night. But we did all agree that if this was paranormal, that a crawler was the best guess we had. Now we're all on the same page. We still don't know if we buy into all the paranormal claims, but this one is starting to convince us. We realised at the end, we hadn't even looked for pictures. We asked my friend on the phone and he shyly admitted he hadn't even thought to take a single picture. I'm not gonna lie, guys, I was so terrified I didn't even open the camera app a single time. I was just trying to make sure it wasn't behind us or charging us. I'm sorry. We told him not to worry. None of us would have been any better about being calm enough to set up a picture. I never saw its face still, but the friend who took the shot swears it didn't have one, or at least had no eyes. He couldn't see if it had a mouth, but it was about 1/3 out from behind the tree, and from his angle, he saw it was blank from the nose area up. Or if it did have eyes, it was too black to be noticeable in the dark. We did all decide, though, we're going to go back. We'll be more prepared next time. We'll do our research. We have a camera strapped to us or always recording. We know what to expect, so we'll be more calm. Any other tips or advice? Please let me know. We'd really like to capture some full-on evidence of this thing. When I was in middle school, I went to a friend's birthday sleepover, where we did the typical girl things, painted nails, did makeovers, and watched a movie. It was all normal, until my friend suggested we make a Ouija board. On a sheet of paper, we scribbled out yes, no, goodbye, along with numbers and the alphabet. She told us all the rules, and we nodded in agreement we would follow. I remember being scared and wanting to fit in, but also wondering if it was a good idea. I remember the first movement happened, and I looked across to the girl facing me, insisting she had moved it. She had said it was not her that moved the clear pebble we all were using as a planchette. We asked dumb questions like who we each liked and if our crushes liked us. Typical middle school girl things. I don't remember much of these sessions, other than a particular name, Wanda, and that we had asked her if she was a demon, and she had told us she was not. After a while, this was no longer scary, and we began to enjoy it more and more. I remember feeling so excited, like I just wanted to keep playing, as if it were a video game. The next day, I told my dad about it. My family was pretty open-minded about those things, so he wasn't mad or ashamed. He just wanted to make sure we were all safe about it. Fast forward, and I was in my first year of college, and I was over at a friend's place for her birthday, and she had talked about how she found a Ouija board, and we should try it. I was a little hesitant, as now I realised the true implications of them. We eventually started setting boundaries, but I was still hesitant to believe that the planchette was moving. My friend asked questions like when's my birthday and what's my name. I shifted to questions not about myself, tending to ask about the entity rather than me. My friend suddenly asked if the spirit knew my deceased grandfather's name, and it spelled out Louis. I was in shock, because none of my friends had known that. I know that I hadn't directed the planchette to the letters, so I was surprised to see that it was correct. Later on, another friend of mine said that she felt something grab her foot under the table. I was right next to her, and I didn't feel anything. At that point, I'm like, let's say goodbye and call it a night. It's all just too weird. I'd never had a truly bad experience, but it's still very creepy, to say the least. My friend and I decided one summer night to go to this place called the Slaughterhouse one evening. When I grew up, there were a lot of urban legends about this place, and the road it was on, Empire Mine Road. The road was located in the Bay Area of California, and the road was shut down after many accidents had happened, and it was deemed unsafe. Although it was still open as a walkable trail, well, we had decided to go alone. I know, 2 youngish girls at night in an abandoned place, not the smartest. In the past, we'd gone in a group of 4 or 5 people, and always found other explorers there, so we didn't think much of it, and we felt pretty safe. I'd brought a film camera with me, hoping to capture something possibly otherworldly on film, to serve as evidence. I also brought my pocket knife just in case. There was a need and for peace of mind, because homeless people sometimes hung out, and there were always rumours of satanic rituals, although I knew the ritual rumour was most likely BS. We started the 20-minute walk to the slaughterhouse itself, and this time felt really different. About a minute or 2 into the walk, I felt heavy with dread and fear, but I didn't want to say anything and creep out my friend or seem like I was chickening out. We made it up to the final turn to a straight away where it sounded like we were next to a freeway. But at this point, we were at least a mile off from the nearest road. The loud sounds of cars and car doors closing were supposedly the remains of all the accidents that happened along that road, but I wasn't so sure. I just figured sounds were carried with the wind from the faraway freeways and roads. We made it down the final stretch, now we hopped the fence and we were on the property. This place was very different from the last time. It looked as if it had burned and the buildings were blocked off by rubble, so there wasn't really much to do. I walked to buildings I had photographed at a previous visit for comparison, and began joking to my friend as I started feeling a bit more comfortable. I don't remember what I was exactly doing, but I turned my back to the building. My friend stared at me and said dead seriously, "Come here now," and I walked over like, what's the matter? Apparently, she had seen a dark figure with red eyes behind me. I didn't personally see it, so I don't know if this was to scare me or not. But as I stepped towards her, I saw a dark truck travelling the road we had just walked on. This was really weird, because the road was gated off and we parked in front of the gate, which meant no one could come through without moving our car. Our car had not been moved, so it would be nearly impossible for a car to get through. I can't stress this enough, but it would have been nearly impossible for a car to get past our car and the locked gate. The truck was dark and barely visible with no lights on, and it didn't make any sound like road or engine noise. This dark truck pulled up to the gate we had hopped, and we heard yelling to get off my property. We couldn't see anyone in the truck and it was barely lit up. As soon as it was there, it was gone and with no sound. Neither of us saw a gun, but we both swore we had one. I was like, let's get out before whoever or whatever comes back. I nearly ran the mile back, and I'm not someone to run. Once we hit the final stretch, I could see what looked like police lights. We told each other just to remain calm and we'd be fine. Once we got there, the police greeted us politely, and we returned the politeness, hoping to score points. They had said that they received a jumbled up call that was very odd, but what they caught was that there were people on the road. They seemed to be confused by the call as we were. My friend had said we were just walking the road to see the place at night, and never actually hopped the fence, and thank God they believed it. After a few insulting remarks of us being two females on a road at night, we were on our way. We stopped at a well-lit gas station to catch our breath and agreed, never again. I no longer live near this area, but after that I swore I'd never go back, certainly not at night. I still think about this night and it perplexes me about everything that happened. I told myself that it was just the owner, but it doesn't make sense how they could have gotten through our car, and that gate and the confusion the police had as well. In addition, many of the photos I took turned up as pitch black, even though I had flashlights and flash on. I had a few developments and looked normal, but I chalked it off to being a bad film, but the same thing happened with the pictures I took on my phone as well. Overall, this experience has puzzled me. I live in Singapore, and on one random day, my friends and I decided to explore an abandoned place that we visited a few years back, but this time, we decided to explore at night. As usual, I packed my camera gear and all my equipment and filmed the entire time we were exploring in the abandoned place. If you guys would like to research on the place more, feel free to Google Abandoned Brunei Hostel in Singapore. Something about that night made the place and vibes really strange. As soon as we started exploring the place, I started to feel really uncomfortable in the venue. That night was really strange. Among my friends, I was the only one who heard a lady-like voice humming or singing, I don't know. I managed to capture it on tape, but it was really subtle. We continued exploring the place and fast forward to the end. We didn't see or encounter anything in person, mostly weird noises. To my surprise, I'm pretty sure I captured a ghost on camera. Basically, in Asia, we believe in a Malay ghost called the Pontianak. Not really sure about the history of the ghost, but you can Google it for yourself. It was really weird, because none of us noticed or saw the ghost in person, which explains why no one was overreacting, and we continued exploring the place. We have lived in our 1963 house since 2017. Since we've lived here, my husband has had many experiences with ghosts that are children. We have a 4-year-old son, but it wasn't him making the noise. He said children calling out for mommy while our son was sleeping. My husband wakes up before me and our kid. He hears children running around the house at night. Also of note, we still have a Nest camera in our kid's room. We should take it out soon, just because he's getting older. But with the ghost stuff, we haven't pulled the plug on it yet. We've confirmed it wasn't him making any of the noise. Last week at 6 a.m, while me and the kid were sleeping, my husband heard a music box and kids running around the house. We don't have a music box or anything that plays that type of music. When we first moved into the house, our son had reported a few instances of a male ghost. We didn't make a big thing out of it, and we suspect he was dreaming, because when checking the Nest camera, he was asleep all night. But he would routinely talk about a man who was a lava monster. How he'd refer to anyone with burns or red skin at that age, and he'd talk to him. He said he wasn't very nice. He hasn't reported anything to use in the past year, but he wouldn't talk about this visitor for 2 years off and on. I've never had any experience in our house, and the ghosts don't seem bad. At least my son's visitor hasn't reappeared, who was suspicious. I burned sage a few times throughout the house, but that didn't seem to do anything, and would tell spirits to move on or leave. To our knowledge, no children have died in the house unless it's before the house was built. There have only been 3 owners before us, and one of those was the daughter of the original owner. She inherited it from her parents.